Hello, and you're very welcome to Irish Wheelchair Association's celebration of International Day of Persons with a Disability on December 3rd. All week, we're talking to influential and prominent people in the world of disability, and today I'm delighted to welcome Paddy Slattery. And Paddy, I've got to do the homework before we proceed, just to advise everybody that this is a live recording and that your comments or your names may appear on screen. So if posted, so please bear that in mind. So Paddy, it's great to talk to you. You're very welcome.
How's it
Um,
going?
it's going well. It's going well. And for those of you out there who aren't familiar with Paddy, Paddy is a filmmaker. He's a writer, producer, director, and now, as of this year, an actor. Paddy is a multi IFTA nominated filmmaker, and Paddy fell in love with filmmaking during a certain time in his life following a serious car accident. Um, Paddy's debut feature, Broken Law, which received completion funding from Screen Ireland, had its world premiere at the VMDIFF 20, VMDIF 20, in front of a sold out crowd in the IMAX and went on to a special jury prize in the Dublin Film Critics Circle, along with an Aer Lingus Discovery Award. Broken Law was released in cinemas nationwide and became the highest grossing Irish film of 2020 before its Netflix release in Ireland and the UK. And also, Paddy, as of the year, this year, moved into the world of acting and was the star of the acclaimed production of No Magic Pill, celebrating the life of disability advocate Martin Naughton. So, Paddy, you know, I think it's ironic that you said to me the before the call began that you prefer being behind the camera rather than in front of the camera because you went into acting, and you described yourself as an all-around chancer.
Yeah.
I think we could all fit that bill if we wanted to. So, how have you been? How are you keeping?
I'm good, thank God. I'm just about alive. I'm on my way to getting better. I'm getting healthier, but
Good
it
man.
will probably take me a few months. It's been a long year because, like, I got COVID and I got pneumonia, and that was sore. And then I had another hiccup physically, and then like there's this documentary being made about my life called Beyond the Body. So that's been keeping us busy. And then the play, No Magic Pill. So I appreciate the exercise, but at the same time, I was wrecked throughout it.
Absolutely. Between COVID and then like doing a full on production and then going into to No Magic Pill, I can imagine the body. It just at the end of it, it's telling you to take a step back probably. And is are there any lessons you've learned? Because it sounds like you've been, and I don't mean this patronizing way, but nearly burning the candle at both ends. Like it's been full on.
You're right. Yeah, that's probably it comes with age and wisdom. But I think the older I get, the more I realize without this shell, I don't exist. So I'm trying to balance the body, the mind, and the soul, whatever that is. I'm trying to balance it because, like you said, for maybe 15, 20 years, I have burnt a candle at both ends and I paid for it, especially making films. It's not easy, and making plays, it's not easy. You have to be up early, in bed late, and your mind is constantly going. And I don't know if I am physically capable of that right now. So this year for me was it was a massive learning curve, but it was a massive red flag for me that if I do want to live, and I do want to live, well, realistically, I want to live forever, but I want to realistically live for the next 40 or 50 years. But if I do that, I need to look after this. And
Hmm.
I can even see my reflection on the camera, and I'm like, I'm bang out of shape. You can even kind of make out the red rosy nose because I was out in the garden getting hypothermia, walking the dog. So, but do we ever learn?
And do you think no that just interesting to that point? I think we all could learn to take a step back, but do you think that sometimes as people who have disabilities that we push those we feel we have to push those boundaries
Mm,
and to keep going a little bit longer, um,
I do
maybe
agree. Yeah.
incorrectly so, but do you think we naturally do that nearly to prove a point?
You know what? I think we do it subconscious to ourselves.
Mm,
There's this element of self sabotage because Like one of the things I've learned and was crystallized in my mind during the making of No Magic Pill with Christian and even our dramaturge Peter Kearns,
Mm,
I learned that us people with disabilities, for me, for example, when I was 17, the whole world, I mean, neurologists, doctors, society told me I couldn't do anything, I couldn't achieve this or I couldn't achieve
mm,
that or the other. So constantly, subconsciously, I'm thinking I need to overreach or I need to accomplish great things, and need to make people sit up and think, "Be God, they're well able to do that," you know. And so for many years, I've realized recently that most of my accomplishments were from that desire to prove myself to other people, and
mm,
ultimately, it's not really good for me. So in many ways, I've become sort of selfish in a good way, but I know that like what's the point of me trying to prove myself to others? Because the only one that respects myself, the only one that loves myself is myself. And listen, I'm very blessed with great family, great friends. But at the end of the day, my definition of success is the love I have and respect I have for myself. So I only need to impress or make myself
mm,
proud. And that might sound selfish, but I know that I will probably live longer because of that ethos.
mm,
So I'm tired now of trying to prove myself to other people. Doesn't matter if I have a disability. I not that I don't care. I just it's not a defining characteristic of who I am. And if people don't know who I am, or if people want to judge me because I'm in a wheelchair, then that's their loss. Like honestly,
mm,
I don't go out my way to try and prove myself to anyone anymore. Now that might look like on the surface that I'm a bit selfish, but if you want to get to know me, get to know me.
mhm,
And you will find no disrespect to any wheelchair users, but to know me, and it kind of segues a bit to Martin Nocton. What impressed me most about Martin Nocton was I got to know the charm and charisma first.
mm,
And it just happened to be a guy who uses a wheelchair to get around. I didn't know or understand the nature of his disability. I still respected it, but I was still enamored by his confidence and his character. And that's what I need to do. I need to be strong in myself before I can be strong for other people, if that makes sense.
No, no, and it does makes perfect sense to me, and it kind of feeds in to, I suppose, a theme that we were talking about: see my disability, but see my ability, and it's about not ignoring the disability, but not letting people define you by it. It's a part of who you and I are, as it
Mm,
is with everybody, but it's not all that we
I
are,
I
and I think
agree.
yeah, and I think sometimes it's a common theme that I think will come up this week about the fact that sometimes the public perceptions and expectations of
Mm,
people who have disabilities are sometimes skewed by I suppose
mm,
the expectation that if you're not one of these people who does 6 marathons in 3 days with 3 fridges on your back, by virtue of not achieving that is someone with a disability, then you're not successful, which is completely
yeah,
skewed. But I think
yeah.
that's maybe the expectation, and that's where I hated it'll probably come up every day because of me, because it's a bugbear about the Channel 4, the Meet the Superhumans tagline that they used for the Paralympics. It drives me crazy because these aren't superhumans.
Yeah,
These are just people, very talented sports people who worked hard to be where they are. But it feeds into that narrative a little bit, and that's why I disliked it.
but
Um,
you know what? I do agree because there's one correlation with people who get involved in Paralympics or that. There's that motivation, not just to prove yourself to yourself, but prove yourself to others. And other athletes in the Olympics, for example, are motivated by being the best at their discipline. But anyone with a disability is trying to prove to other people that, yes, I'm still here. Yes, I can still do it. Yes, I can't get into that building because no, it's not accessible. So we talked briefly about what does disability mean, and there is this section of people who are extremely proud of being disabled people, and that's fine. As a sort of an indicator, it's important to let people know that I have a disability, I can't access this, that, or the other. And then there's this huge portion of society that think, Well, to be disabled means literal sense you're not able to do something, and you will judge a person by that characteristic. And so there is this war between, am I a disabled person or a person with a disability? And there's nothing wrong with being a disabled person. I used to be insulted by that phrase until I understood what disability meant. And I think if anything needs to change, it's like I was saying before, it's our relationship to that word. Well,
Mm,
what does disability mean? Now, maybe it's another word for that community, disabled community. Maybe another word will give that indication clearly that I need assistance with accessing certain places or certain things. But to the broader scope of people, to judge me by my appearance,
mm.
like I said earlier, it's their loss. But we
Yes,
do that as human beings. We do judge. You know that saying, "Never judge a book by its cover," but we do that.
but we do.
Even
Yeah, we
species
do.
do that. Like that peacock syndrome. It's like we always want to show our best selves, and that's why social media and magazines and newspapers and TV works
Mm,
because we are all about our appearance to people, how we look and sound to people. And once we can get by that in an ideal world, then people will be judged by their characteristics, by their morals, by their personality. And that's important. And I've learned that over the last few years, but I've only learned it because I was disabled.
mm.
It's through that lens that I learned my real strengths, which is kind of ironic.
Yeah, it is, and it's you've brought me to one of the questions really that I was going to be chatting to you later on about. Someone had asked me, do you think we'll ever get to a place where the world won't have such a term as disability? Uh, What's your opinion on that?
My opinion, my off the cuff opinion is like in the language, in the English language, disability means a certain thing. But most people that I see in this disabled community, yes, it's a brilliant indicator that I have a physical or sensory disability, yes. But is it the right word? Probably not, because to use that word, it gives someone the opportunity to judge me as a person that's not able, and that's not who I am. And
Mm,
listen, I mean no disrespect to anyone in the disabled community. I think it's a very important phrase. However, ultimately, if I want to prove to myself to other people, I have to, first of all, get by the barrier of disability. I have to prove to people that I'm not disabled, yet I'm a disabled person. So there is that conundrum, that catch
yes.
22. It's an
Yeah. Yeah.
important word, but is it the right word? Probably not. And you know what? We live and learn and evolve. Maybe there will come a time when we'll see that word and it has a huge negative implication or connotation. However, there's nothing wrong with having a disability, but
Yeah. Yeah.
you try and tell that to masses, and it's very hard to teach people that know
Yeah,
that.
it's very interesting because there's a big I suppose debate on at the moment as to whether disabled person or person with a disability is the right term. For me, it's just a word, so either or is acceptable to me, and I would use them interchangeably. But I would always be a person first, um,
I do agree,
by
and you know what?
default.
That's my, shall
That's
I
my
say,
way.
that's my
Yeah,
stance on it. I
yeah.
would rather be, if you want to judge me or if you want to have an opinion on me, base it on my personality rather than how I might look. But that might sound idealistic in today's world.
Well, no, it's not. And look, I think that to come to a place where the world that doesn't use that word, it would have there would have to be such a monumental shift to society, culture of society, because we don't talk about able-bodied people when we're making the world. Disabled came in as a label to give
Mm,
context. So for that,
mm.
for the world to be constructed in such a way that it doesn't even come into the question would be too much. I would love to see it realistically. I think we could come to a point where it's just a word. It gives
Yeah,
context, but for a lot of people at the moment, it comes with too many negative perceptions and connotations, and that's
I
what they're
do.
uncomfortable with, rather than so the judgment piece rather than the word
Yeah,
itself. But
I do agree.
yeah,
And John, very briefly, we both live in a world right now that is quote unquote woke or aware of.
yeah,
It's very sensitive to people's needs. It's very quote, diverse. And in an ideal world, like, yeah, we're doing great things for society, but are we fundamentally doing things that are right for us? Probably not. And maybe language does need to evolve and change. That doesn't mean we're undermining people's achievements. But what is happening in today's world is that we're so preoccupied by how I might look and how I might feel and how much money I have in the bank and how famous I am. And that's our current worldwide metric on success. But for me and you and people we know and people we admire and respect, the definition of success is like, who am I in this whole story of life? And
Yeah,
that's what's important to me. But we live in a world that the metric now is, well, how many likes, how many clicks, how famous am I, how rich am I? And that's skewed. And ironically, we live in a world, more people nowadays are lonely. More people
mm,
nowadays are depressed. More people nowadays are suicidal. And why is that? And it's very simple, is because we've become so preoccupied by this idea or this notion of what success is, that 98% of us are unsuccessful. We can't attain that illusory sense of accomplishment. But when we do look back into ourselves, we realize, actually, I'm pretty okay. Actually, I love myself. Actually, you know what? I don't judge myself on my appearance, but you start to love yourself the more you look in. And that's not to say that there's some geographic location as to I should look in to love myself, but the more I look into myself, the more I feel an affinity with the world, and the more I feel connected and related and I belong. So more people need to do that, disabled or non-disabled. You need to look into yourself a little bit and
mm,
love and respect yourself. And the more you do that, you don't need to have any affiliations with religion. You don't have to have any affiliations with a certain business motto. You just need to look into yourself and respect yourself and love yourself. And in that pool, you'll discover that yes, you have the ability to do it. So, like, as a byproduct, yes, I make people sit back and think, holy crap, he could do that. But on the surface, it's kind of contrary to what people would expect from me. Does that make
mhm.
sense?
Yeah, no, it does. It does. And talking about success, Paddy, we're here to celebrate you today, and to talk about what you've achieved this year. No Magic Pill has been an incredible success, and congratulations on the success of the production. I think it's been amazing. But how did you feel about taking on the role of someone who was such an iconic figure in terms of the world of advocacy and disability rights and all the rest? Was it daunting?
It was daunting. It was terrifying. And I said to Christian O'Reilly, who wrote the play,
Mm,
like, I honestly didn't know if I could actually do it or not. Like, acting is one thing, acting on a stage is another in front of people. But memorizing the lines and memorizing the choreography, and that's all before you even get to know who this Martin Naughton is. And for me, my opinion of Martin Naughton, I was very lucky where I got to know the human Martin Naughton.
okay.
But there's also this ideological icon of who Martin Naughton is, that aspirational, confident, charismatic character. And I couldn't quite relate to that. So I spoke to people who knew him intimately, and
Mhm.
Christian thankfully knew him. Raymond and Peter and Sorka and Julie and Mark and Ferdia and Peter Kearns, like everyone who was involved, and Mitzi, like everyone who was involved in the integral part of making the play, and my PA Dave Foley. Like, without that help, I wouldn't have been able to find my way in my own personal route into who Martin Naughton was. But I felt once I could relate to Martin, the human being, I
Mm.
could become Martin in the play. And that might sound contrived, but it's true. And initially, starting out, I had no way into him because I revered him so much. I was like, wow, what a man. And suddenly I have to play him. I'm like, I could never do that until I knew that there was a way into him.
Yeah, like look, Martin was an iconic figure for anybody in I suppose the world of disability in Ireland. He was I knew him. I didn't know him very well, but as a young lad, he was very tolerant of my arrogance and probably enthusiasm growing up. I remember him being
Confidence, confidence, John.
confidence. We'll say confidence. It will be positive. But he was very calm, but he was very gentle, and I always remember his smile. And if I made some stupid statements, which I did on probably a number of occasions, Martin would just he'd just have that quiet air about him that. But you knew that there was a steel behind Martin. So was there a danger of with this production of falling into the trap of
Mm.
remembering the ideological Martin rather than the real Martin, because the real Martin is behind the character is a different nature of a beast as well.
Yeah, well, I'll be honest, and I'm not being dismissive, but I tried not to think of the ideological
Mm,
Martin Octon. My compass, my anchor was the script, and in the script, he's very human. And what I couldn't quite relate to with the human Martin was that, like you said, he's very patient and very charismatic and very charming, but he's also an angry fighter. Like if
mm,
somebody does him wrong, he can tell someone to feck off. He can be very forthright about what he wants. Whereas I use the term I'm a lover, not a fighter. But ultimately that is not really good beneficial for me long
mm,
term. And Martin had the gravel, he had the fight in him. To be an activist, you need to be angry, you need to be pissed off. And who's John Carty? John, you're an amazing human being. But I was just reading the comment there at the bottom.
yeah, let's not get carried away. She'll get cocky. She'll get cocky. But go on.
But you know what? I don't quite have that. I have that in my life. I know
Mm,
what I want as a filmmaker. I know what I want in my family. But it takes a special kind of grit to be, I guess, I won't say what's the word polemic. I can't be angry one minute and nice the next. I just am generous and
mm,
content. Whereas Martin had the ability to be, he was a good actor, he was a very good politician with people, but when he would go away from people that he wanted something from, he could be very human, he could be very angry. Whereas I might be quite impulsive, Martin can be quite or could be quite calculate with his emotions. And I don't mean that in a bad way. I just
mm-hmm,
mean if you're angry, he had the ability to be able to mask it or bottle it up until the right time. And I don't
mm.
think I can do that. So that takes like a special kind of talent because let's face it, we all get angry. It's one of those natural emotions. There's nothing wrong with being angry or pissed off or lonely or that's the full spectrum of the human experience. But how you use that to your advantage is difficult.
So
And Martin could do that quite
he
well.
could, he could. So was that it there in the challenge for you in bringing your Martin to the role? And was it about those conversations and that research, or where were the challenges for you, Paddy?
You know what? My like when it comes to acting, like for me, it's not about me being Martin. That's up to the audience. The audience
Okay.
can interpret that story and they will start to create the Martin in their head. So it's a quite engaging transaction because your audience need to psychologically work or create that story. But for me as an actor, and I mean me as a director, when I look for an actor, I don't look for someone that can come in and impersonate in this case, Martin Upton. I want someone that can come in and woo me with charisma and tap into that honesty and that emotion. So through that emotion, if we, I guess, honor Martin in the script, that character will come through me naturally.
Okay.
So it's never my ambition to be Martin Nocton. It just so happens that it comes through the script and the audience will put two and two together in their brain and they're like, that's the Martin I remember. But for
Okay.
me personally, I don't have that ambition because like that's a great weight, emotional weight to, oh Jesus, I have to take on this role and I have to become Martin and I have to impress people. I think doing things backwards. It's putting this invisible weight on myself or this
Mm.
pressure. And I don't need that. For an actor, you need to be free, you need to be liberated, and you need to be honest. But to be honest, you need to have the confidence to say, right, the script is good. The audience know Martin. Even if they don't know Martin, they have an idea of who Martin was. And it's up to me then as an actor in that position to, I guess, be as honest to that role as possible. And through that comes Martin.
And as you'll see from the comments there coming up, and from the feedback everybody I know who went to see it was blown away by the portrayal. And not just because it was Martin, because it was just such a good production. Question for you: does it have to be a person with a disability playing a person with a disability?
You know what? There's a reason why that is a controversial question.
Okay,
And of
tell me.
course, my impulse is if you want to attain authenticity of a disability, then naturally you should hire a disabled actor. However, and Christian and Peter and Raymond know this, like fundamentally, there's just not enough disabled actors in the world of theatre or cinema or even radio. There's not enough disabled actors. Yes, there are opportunities now and again that come and go. However, the emphasis is on the disability. But if it's somebody with a disability that is inconsequential to the story, then I don't think there's any reason why an able-bodied person as an actor can channel that energy and be
Mm,
authentic to that role. And like there is no yes or no. It's like that whole abortion argument. There is no yes or no. It's a sort of a moral and an ethical issue. But for me, in terms of acting, in terms of disabled versus non-disabled actors, like fundamentally we're acting, we're make believing, we're creating this illusion of a reality. So we're lying in a sense. In theatre, I think it's more possible to hire disabled actors. I would just love to see more opportunities for disabled actors. And when I do go and make my film called Reverse, I will look for acting talent with disabilities. Not because I have to, not because I want to, but because certain roles will require that experience. That it doesn't matter if you're a brilliant actor, there's a certain experience or lived experience with a disability, whether it's autism, whether it's quadriplegia, whether it's cerebral palsy, it doesn't matter. There's a certain level of authenticity that comes with that experience. And generally, you want a disabled actor for that role because they can portray the honesty in that. But
mm-hmm,
if I'm making a big fat Marvel movie with a budget of quarter of a billion, it's very hard to raise that money, first of all, because in order to raise that money, you need celebrities, you need stars, and
okay.
there aren't enough quote unquote stars economically that can sell a movie with a disability, with a real disability. So it's very hard, John, to say yes or no to that answer because we're kind of stuck in a world where we know what's right fundamentally, but we're moving into a world where hopefully there will be more opportunities for disabled actors or actors with disabilities to be able to honestly portray their experience. But right now, unfortunately, the pool is so thin. And
Mm.
realistically, that's probably why I got the role as Martin because like the pool of talent is so small in this country and internationally, and that's heartbreaking to see, but it won't always be that way, hopefully.
And look, I'll be the first to say, when I saw My Left Foot, I thought Daniel Day Lewis did a fantastic job in acting. Or Al Pacino in Scent of a Woman. They were again there. The people would say, "Look, it's acting. They're able to do that." Do you think somewhat there would have been a sense of authenticity to the roles that maybe those two actors wouldn't have brought if it had been someone with a disability? I know it's a controversial question, and in a woke world, people might be afraid to answer it.
You know what? Like I've no fear about answering because I'm only being honest. And if I upset people, then fair enough. But those two films, Scent of a Woman and My Left Foot,
Mm,
when you look at those movies, you get a sense of how people belong in the world. It's not about cerebral palsy or a person being blind. It's
mm,
about this metaphoric disability, and it's about someone overcoming trials and tribulations in order to prove to other people that are quite ignorant. So it's not necessarily like My Left Foot. Yes, it's about a character, Christy Brown, who's got cerebral palsy. Yes, but if you watch that movie in defense of Daniel Day Lewis and in defense of Jim Sheridan, it's actually a great story. And if
mm,
you can forget the disability, you can actually love that movie for what it is or for what it's saying. But if I wanted to portray the honesty of cerebral palsy, I would probably make a documentary and it would probably feature Christy Brown and it would probably be about his trials and tribulations.
mm.
And no one else can convey that honesty, that lived experience. So no, I don't lose sleep on Daniel Day Lewis. What I lose sleep on is somebody hiring somebody that's of an ethnic origin or has a disability for the sake of hiring them because they have this.
Okay,
Because there's this
interesting.
quota that they have to hire people, whether they're good or whether they're bad, well, at least they're present. And that's good enough for some people. And it's not good enough for me. If
Okay.
I'm going to represent who I am, I want to make sure that I represent myself well and not just be a token character, not be there for the sake of somebody else's, emotional conundrum.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's the same argument that is can be put across in relation to employment. Again, there are debates about that, about quota systems and getting people into the role. Are they there for a quota? Or are they there for their actual
Yeah.
talent and their ability? It's an ongoing conundrum. But getting back to No Magic Pill, Paddy, where do you see the next Martin Naughton coming from?
I think I was asked this question in a Q&A at the end of the play in Dublin in the Civic Theatre. And honestly, it might sound like a contrived answer, but like I was saying as well, it's easier to portray Martin than to be a Martin Naughton, than to be an activist. It's not easy,
Mm,
but it's something that has to come from within. And it's easy for me to say, well, the next Martin Naughton might not be Martin Naughton. There's a lot of people waiting on the second coming of Jesus Christ. And they will wait and they will wait and they will wait and they will wait for centuries. But ultimately, what it actually means, this second coming of Martin or Jesus Christ or whoever, it has to be something within you that's something that clicks, that there's something in my life that's unjustifiable. And that makes me angry enough to be an activist. And if I subsequently inspire people, then great. If I don't, then grand. But I am who I am, and like the Martin Naughton that we know is just gonna like cream. It'll just rise to the top. And like I admire people, especially during COVID, who took to the streets during there was many different riots, not riots, but what would you say,
protest,
like protests.
protests.
It takes a special kind of person, but in order to be Mr. Protest, you have to find an affinity. You have to find a sense of belonging, and that's all we want is a sense of belonging. So the next Martin Naughton, as contrived as it sounds, is me, is you, and is the
Mm,
person next to us. It's everybody. It's just that sense of right, this is wrong, and I have to fight for what's right, and that's what it means to be an activist. And when I think of Martin, my heart breaks because realistically, he'd probably still be with us today if he didn't fight for other people. Like he sacrificed his own well-being for other
mhm,
people, and that takes a special kind of grit to be able to give yourself freely to other people. It's like a martyrdom where, like, I'm not condoning martyrism, but there's a certain commitment that I know in my lifetime I might not have contentment, but the next generation or the generation after, and that takes a certain level of selflessness. And I don't know if I have that. Maybe or maybe not. I can be the next Martin Naughton or the next Paddy Slattery or the next John Fulham. I don't know. But
mm,
all I know is what's right and what's wrong. And generally, what's right in the world is fundamentally good for me. And that might sound selfish, but when I say me, I mean me and the broader sense of myself, my own community, my family, my friends. And that's the battle that we're up against now, is that battle of good and evil. That's the basis for any good story, is conflict, good and evil.
Well, maybe at the time the disability community needed a Martin, and there were others. Colin O'Doherty, there was Donald Tulin, who's no longer with us. All of these guys, I suppose they ploughed a furrow for us that we can follow, and maybe the achievement for Martin, which you'd be delighted to see, but that there wouldn't be a Martin anymore. There would be lots of Martins, which is I think kind of feeds into the point you're making, Paddy, if I get you correctly, that
Yeah,
it's all of us now, and that more people will have the confidence to fight that fight where it needs to be fought,
I do
or
agree.
yeah,
But you know why my heart breaks? Because we're telling a story, an origin story from the 70s, the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s. Like that's, I don't want to show my age now, but that's a long time ago. And we're
yeah,
still fighting the fight that Martin has fought 40, 50 years ago. We're trying to be heard and noticed. And it's very hard to do that in a world that's very materialistic and superficial. And in a world that judges people by their appearance. But that's
yeah. Well,
heartbreaking to know that we're still fighting that fight. But it took Martin and the team around him the courage to be able to do that against the norm, the
I
so-called
think
norm.
I feel personally, I think it's nearly our responsibility to keep that to keep her lit, as they say, to keep that torch lighting, and we do, and we will. Now, on a different question, Paddy, um, who inspires you today, or where do you take your inspiration from to keep doing what you're doing?
Again, it might sound cliche, but like I love my mother. I love my father. I love my family. I love my friends. I love you. I love, like, I
Steady
get
on,
my,
steady on.
but it's true. I get my inspiration from the people around me. Yes, I might have certain celebrities. I don't do the whole celebrity thing, but there
Yeah,
is certain actors and certain singers that I would aspire to achieve in great things. But what we find is what we do, it's a human thing. We look to these role models and we aspire to be them, and that's important. But then the more human they become and the more mistakes they make, the more we realize actually, if I'm to admire anybody, if I'm to build this philosophical foundation, I need to respect and love myself. I need to respect and love my family, good, bad, or indifferent. I need to love that because that is me, and on that I can build my metaphoric empire. So there's nothing wrong with aspiring to do great things or aspiring to be X, Y, or Z.
mm,
But if I don't love myself, it's that old age of Citizen Kane, the movie.
yeah.
There's this one character that's given everything materialistically, but fundamentally, he's a kid that was abandoned by his parents. So his last dying words were Rosebud. So people were like, well, why Rosebud? Who's Rosebud? He was the richest man in the world. Why Rosebud? And it goes all the way back to his childhood, his relationship with his child self with his family. And if that's not right, nothing's right. It doesn't matter what I have. If I've got 10 billion people and I hate myself, or 10 billion euros or dollars and I hate myself, I guarantee you I will wield that money for power and corruption. I guarantee you because ultimately I hate myself. And I know how idealistic that sounds, but
No, I think we probably I would tell you that we probably know one or two people on the in the international profile that might fit into that category, but we won't name names. We won't get political.
But you
Um,
know what, John? They're human beings at the end of the day.
yeah,
Yes, they've been catapulted into fame and celebrity and this, that, and the other, but they are reachable, they are attainable, they are human at the end of the day. So, like I'm saying, like rather than admiring celebrities, admire yourself first, and then you'll have the kudos to go out into the world and be a good person or a good version of yourself.
is that the advice you'd give to young people with disabilities now, or would you give them a different piece of advice?
You know what? It's kind of hard to give that advice, especially when I was 17. and the whole world is telling me I can't do this and I can't do that. And I had to be kind of stubborn in a way that I had to go back into myself. I had to find what I loved and admired and was proud about myself. And that took certain courage, because if I believe the world, like if the world, according to the world, is that I'm useless, that I'm not capable of doing things. So I don't know, it's very hard to do that. But my advice to students, or young or old, is that if you don't love yourself, then what is the point? Where is the strength? You're not going to get it from someone else, because someone else is human. Whether it's your mother or your partner or whatever, it doesn't matter. They will let you down because they are not you. If you don't feel right in yourself, and honestly, my definition of success is how I feel right now. Right now, I'm content. Yes, physically, I'm unhealthy. Yes, I've been burning the candle at both ends. However, I'm quite content in who I am. And that, I can only say that because I love myself. I admire myself. And it's very un Irish to love yourself. But I mean that in a selfless kind of way.
Hmm. Well, do you know, I agree with you. If you don't love yourself, Paddy, um, it's very hard for other people too at times. So yeah, we
I
love you
agree.
too. By the way, just so you know, we'll reciprocate the comment. So if you were Taoiseach for the day, what one change would you make in Ireland?
If I was Taoiseach for a day, well, a day is very hard and unrealistic to change things. But I do know, like, if I was given a month, if I was given a day to answer your question, it's very hard because a Taoiseach, at the end of the day, they're human. But there is this culture in politicians that look after yourself first. You know, pad your own self first, and then pad other people's selves. There's this Mayfanism with Taoiseach, or even politicians in general, is that they say they're there for the people, and good politicians generally are, but then they get corrupted by the culture of being a politician. But to an extent, your hands are tied because you've got a budget. You've got, say, in our context, we've got how many million people in Ireland? It's like 4 or 5 million. So it's very hard. You can't please everyone all of the time. What you can do as Taoiseach is give someone an opportunity to have a fruitful life. Whether you have money or not, you can still have a fruitful life. But the world we live in today, through our politicians and governments, is telling us that we are not deserving, we're not worthy of not just being healthy, but being warm, all the fundamental needs as human beings. We're not told that. So if I was Taoiseach for a day, I'd probably sack the whole cabinet. I would, not that I would become a rebel. I would still be able to dance to that tune, but it's very hard for a day. It's very hard to make life in
Hmm.
Ireland right. But I know what a teacher needs to do, but they
Say for
don't
so,
do that.
but well, I tell you what, sacking the whole cabinet for your one day is enough of an achievement in its own right, Paddy. I'd say that would put the ripples
It's
uh,
like
out
Elon Musk. I'll get the headlines for today. But what will I
today.
do tomorrow? I'll
Well,
get
what'll happen is he'll probably reappoint them
yeah,
if it's Mihal or Leo that we're talking about. But who knows? In
exactly.
6 months
But you know
or a
what,
year's
John?
time, could be different.
There is good human beings in politics. There are good human beings in politics. However, that doesn't always mean that they'll get the sway in politics, because there's a lot of selfish, arrogant narcissists involved in politics that are looking after themselves and their friends and their cronies first. And then the minions, the little people, they have to go out and protest. And that's the politics I see today. So I don't involve myself too much, but I know that our conversation today might have a more of a positive impact on our society, as opposed to what our Taoiseach might be able to do for the country in a day, you know.
Yeah, absolutely, Paddy. I agree. And we're coming to the end of the session. So my final question for you is there anything that you one thing or anything that you would wish people to know about being a person who has a disability?
You know what? In my life, and I'm 43 years of age, I'm about 26 years paralyzed, 27 years paralyzed. And what I've learned in my lifetime of experience, and I'm a quadriplegic, so yes, fundamentally, There are things that I need, some basic needs I need assistance with. But what I found in my life is that A, it doesn't define me, and B, there's a lot of people out there who might think they don't have a disability that are crippled by depression, anxiety, suicide, and whatnot, and addiction. And honestly, I see a lot of people out in the world that are even more disabled than I am that don't, on the surface, have a disability. So, my definition of not being able to do something is how I define myself. So, yes, I have a quadriplegic disability. Yes, yes, yes. However, that's not going to be the definition of me. I'm not going to be told by someone that I can or can't do something. It's up to me at the end of the day. That might sound idealistic, but we've got a world of 8 billion people, and probably 6 billion of them 8 billion are unhappy with themselves. Why is that? That's absurd. We all have the gift, and the gift is that sense of just being alive, like just being alive, feeling the oxygen in our lungs, feeling our heartbeats. That is precious. So, my definition of being disabled, like I was saying, yes, I have a disability, but like the category disability, it's prevalent throughout the world, I think.
Okay, Paddy. And you know what? The one thing I love about talking to you is that I can just ask a question and then just let you go.
I know.
Oftentimes there might not be any need to ask another question, which is great because I love talking to you. But unfortunately, we've come to the end of our broadcast today. So look, it's always a pleasure. And if your achievements are anything to go by, we'll be celebrating you again, and hopefully we'll be talking again. You'll become a serial guest for us. But thank you for taking the time today to talk to us and celebrate International Day of Persons with Disabilities by celebrating you. And I look forward to talking to you again in the near future.
Thank you so much.
All right, Paddy. Thanks a million. Good luck to you.
Anytime, sir.